Good morning, everyone. Eric Hayden with the Weather Service in Morehead City. We'll get started. This is our briefing for this morning. Most of you should have this in your email. We sent it out a little over an hour ago. As always, you can ask questions at the end through the webinar feature itself, or you can raise your hand and we'll verbally call on you. I'll do a follow-up after the storm is over with, but I really have been impressed with the GoToWebinar app on the phone. I was listening to Ryan last night. It's really neat. If you swipe to the right, you can see the full screen presentation. If you swipe the other way, you can see the person talking, in this case, myself. So some of you may be watching it on your personal computer or laptop, and that's more than fine. But don't forget, if you're on the road, if you're not at your home office, you can download the app, and it works very, very well. We've had a lot of success with this so far. So always appreciate the feedback, and Kristen, thanks for the feedback on the audio. So just a reminder on that. Also some housekeeping before we advance the slides. We do plan to send another PDF by 6:30 this evening. The difference is we are not going to do another webinar. I'm going to go ahead and cancel it when this is done. I didn't want to mess anything up with regards to this one. So no more webinars, but we'll send out PDFs as needed, especially by 6:30 with any headline changes, and then either midday or late tonight if anything changes headline wise. But this will be the last webinar, but as always, you can call the office if you've got any questions about things. All right, now that that's over with, not a lot of change overnight in terms of the headlines. Still remain under a tropical storm warning for our whole area. Your eyes are probably drawn toward the hurricane warning down in Wilmington's area from Pender County south. That's a little bit closer to the area of landfall, and that's why the hurricane watch that they were under was upgraded to a warning. Storm surge watches came out yesterday. No changes with those. Anywhere in the watch area is at risk for 3 feet or greater of inundation above normally dry ground. Again, we're talking about low-lying areas near bodies of water, so that is largely unchanged. We increased the surge risk threat level because of that surge watch that went out last night, so not a big change with that. But Isaias is a real good example that a tropical cyclone, whether it's a tropical storm or a hurricane, not a huge difference. All of the impacts, we have already seen it with rips. Now we'll start to see it tonight with wind, surge, rainfall, and the threat for tornadoes. So we preach this during the hurricane preparedness classes, and this unfortunately is a really good example of that. The latest on Isaias, still tropical storm, 70-mile-per-hour winds. With a track off to the northeast, not a lot of change with this track. Could be a little bit of wiggle to the left or right. That will ultimately impact who sees the worst wind and surge. But for all intents and purposes, no large-scale changes with the track overnight. One important thing to remember, if it's a tropical storm, Isaias, or a hurricane, our impacts have not really changed. So do not let your guard down. I know you all won't, but please help us message that with social media. Impacts will not really change much despite the naming, whether it's a hurricane or not. So please try to get that message out in terms of preparedness or finishing up plans for tonight. The most likely time of arrival for tropical storm force winds, it's tonight. So again, if folks have not made their preparations, they need to do so now, because we expect the winds to pick up through today and really peak tonight. The good news, back on that track for a second, a very, very fast movement in and out of our area tonight, early tomorrow morning. So we had mentioned this for the last couple of days. It's a very fast moving storm. So our window for rain and surge and tornadoes is small, but it will be intense for some hours tonight. But luckily, we'll see improving weather during the day tomorrow. As far as wind goes, potential for strong winds across all of eastern North Carolina, potential for strong tropical storm force winds close to Hurricane Gust, pretty much anywhere. But the most likely corridor of strong winds has been narrowed a little bit. We mentioned a couple days ago it was kind of a broad brush approach with the winds, but you've noticed that the values have kind of clustered along this area from Jacksonville up through Greenville and New Bern. You'll still have sustained winds of tropical storm force across our whole area, and you'll notice there are some enhancements. The best chance for the strongest winds would be coastal Onslow, close to the coast, and also the storm track, so southern Duplin, southern Onslow, but also with a southeast wind up the Neuse River and New Bern. up the Pamlico toward Washington. So if you live near bodies of water, you could see some slight enhancement, even seeing this on the western end of the Albemarle over toward the northern part of Washington County. As far as wind gusts go, we could see some close to or exceeding hurricane force, especially right into the east, right along the track and just to the right of it, up across Onslow County, and then again to the west of New Bern. Where that storm center tracks, and then just to the right of it, we could have the potential for hurricane force wind gusts. So again, continue to message strong tropical storm, low end hurricane. It's about the same, especially in terms of wind speed. Could be some issues with power and trees and things like that. The tornado threat, we continue to spread this message, could be several tornadoes across eastern North Carolina. We're to the right of the track, so that puts all of us at risk. This can produce enhanced areas of damage. So you may see that wind map, and let's say you're on the Outer Banks or a little bit farther to the north and east, you might say, oh, just tropical storm force winds, nothing I really have to worry about. Then you get an EF2 tornado and produces enhanced damage where you are. So folks should be preparing for the possibility of tornadoes. Have those phones charged up. Make sure your do not disturb is turned off and your weather radio has batteries. Help us get that message out because unfortunately this is going to be occurring when a lot of folks are sleeping tonight, if they can, with the wind that's moving through. This is an experimental graphic, peak storm surge. This is kind of a high level picture of what we expect across the area. Could have some issues with beach erosion and things like that. We do want you to focus on the local product. This is where we add some enhancement, the forecaster knowledge. We can kind of tweak things. And by and large, this hasn't changed a lot in terms of area. You'll notice the values have been nudged up just a little bit. So instead of 1 to 3, it's generally 2 to 4. But again, our areas of concern are still the same. With a southeast flow, we're talking about the Crystal Coast and the Outer Banks, Ocracoke, and Hatteras Island, especially from Cape Hatteras south, 2 to 4 possible there. When we're sticking just oceanside, as you get north of the Cape, it'll be a little less, 2 to 3, up through Oregon Inlet. So that's why you're in that 2 to 4 foot range. Our precision is a little, not the best to put just a foot range. So 2 to 4, but thinking 2 to 3-ish up through Oregon Inlet. As you get much farther north, oceanside, I'm not expecting as many issues with that southeast flow. So those are oceanside concerns. As we flip over to the sound, up to 2 feet down East Carteret County, Hatteras Island, Ocracoke, that's really with the southeast wind switching into the southwest. That's going to generally keep the real force of the water away from us, but as it sloshes back a little bit, we'll have some minor low water level rises. The bigger concern on sound side is funneling up the Neuse toward New Bern, funneling up the Pamlico toward Washington, the Pungo River toward Belhaven. These areas especially concerned, 2 to 4 feet possible, Swan Quarter, Englehart, so again, mainland Dare and Hyde on the sound side. That's where we're especially concerned in those areas. And then farther to the north, we've been talking about Manio and Kitty Hawk, 2 to 4 feet above normally dry ground. I do want to emphasize this point. This does not include wave action. So if you are a location that is open facing on the water, those waves will pile on top of that and could produce some locally higher values. We saw that in New Bern with some exposed areas during Florence. So please keep that in mind. Flooding rain threat, still pretty much inland, but anyone could see some localized heavy rain, but still honing in on especially along and west of Highway 17. That's where we still have a flash flood watch in effect. These numbers haven't changed much, generally less than an inch across the Outer Banks or up to an inch, a couple inches in the middle part of our area, and then 2 to 4 across the majority, but we could see 4 to 6, again, northwest Duplin, Lenoir County, Greene, extreme western Pitt County and Martin County. That could produce some issues with flash flooding, and please message to turn around, don't drown. Most of our issues are related to vehicles. This can shift slightly as we get a little bit closer because the storm will be transitioning to moving that heavy rain to the west of the center. But please keep that in mind. Those rainfall amounts could cause some issues, especially with regards to flash flooding. We have been getting some questions about river flooding. At this point, we don't expect any large-scale changes. We are getting some of the heavier rain at the headwaters, and as it flows down, Still, most concerned would be Neuse River at Kinston and Contentnia Creek at Hookerton. This is unchanged from what I said yesterday or what Ryan said. The most likely scenario is approaching, or being in action stage and approaching or exceeding minor flooding. In a worst case scenario, we could approach moderate, but right now we're thinking mainly minor flooding in those areas, and that would be late week. Northeast Cape Fear River at Chinkapin, Tar River at Greenville, kind of one notch lower, mainly in the action stage, and a worst case for you folks would be approaching minor, again, late in the week. With such a fast moving storm, we're gonna have a really good idea by this time tomorrow, once we get, midday tomorrow into the afternoon and we get those rainfall amounts into the river models. Rip current risk, hopefully nobody's headed to the beach today. Now we're starting to see showers and things like that. So hopefully our traffic on the beaches is much lower than it was this past weekend. So by and large, no major changes. The adjustment upward from 1 to 3 to 2 to 4 for storm surge. Those areas have not changed in terms of concern. Please help us message that tornado threat tonight. And again, a lot of this is going to be occurring when folks are sleeping. So having those multiple ways to get warnings is certainly good.